True power often operates in silence, not spectacle. Destruction doesn't always erupt in flames. It doesn't require bloodshed, shouting matches, public scandals, or elaborate revenge. Sometimes, the most devastating kind of destruction is the quiet kind. Not because it's hidden, but because it's deliberately engineered. This is what Machiavelli grasped more clearly than any of his contemporaries. To truly destroy someone, you don't face them head-on, you let them come undone on their own. You don't strike, you step back and give them space to speak. You don't tear down their position, you subtly elevate it just enough for their eventual fall to be both inevitable and dramatic. The moment you respond emotionally, you've stepped into their arena, and in doing so, you reveal a vulnerability. But when you hold your ground in silence, unmoved while they flail, mock, provoke, and perform, you don't just withhold attention, you deprive them of fuel. And without fuel, their fire flickers out. This is the dynamic. Someone tries to provoke you, belittle you, or undermine you in front of others. The instinct for most is to strike back, with words, emotions, or defensiveness. But Machiavelli would simply watch, knowing that real power begins the moment you choose not to react. The objective isn't to engage in battle. It's to hold such a composed, unwavering presence that every move they make becomes a reflection of themselves, until they unravel under their own momentum while you remain silent. Your first and most powerful tool is stillness. But don't mistake it for inaction. Stillness is a quiet form of control that disorients your opponent. They anticipate chaos. They brace for heat. They want an emotional outburst so they can point and say, "See how unstable they are." But when you offer them nothing, no reaction, no drama, the instability shifts back onto them. The more they speak, the more unsteady they appear. The more they try to justify themselves, the more guilty they begin to look. The more they try to provoke you, the less serious their stance seems. Because the moment someone needs to prove their strength, it's already slipping through their fingers. It is better to be feared than loved, if you cannot be both. This was the essence of what Machiavelli mastered, the art of perception. He didn't waste energy trying to win arguments. Instead, he let his enemies unravel in public, tangled in their own confusion and desperation, until their reputations collapsed under the weight of their own words. And when the dust finally settled, he hadn't just survived, he had risen above. Now here's how you can wield that same approach with sharp precision. If someone disrespects you publicly, don't react. Don't flinch. Don't speak. Don't even blink. Pose. Then turn and look at them, not with hostility, not with shock, but with detached observation. Let the silence stretch just slightly too long. Let their words echo awkwardly in the stillness. Then shift. Address someone else. Change the subject. Carry on as though nothing happened. In doing so, you've reshaped the atmosphere. They came prepared for a clash. You offered indifference. And in that quiet refusal, you delivered the most Machiavellian message possible. You are not significant enough to disrupt my peace. The room takes notice, even if no one can quite explain why. They feel the shift. Something intangible has changed. You didn't lash out. You didn't back down. You didn't seek reassurance. You simply held the silence, and in doing so, took control. And within that silence, they started to diminish. Here's the deeper truth. Most people aren't trying to win a battle, they're trying to shape how others see you. They want to frame you as weak, unstable, or embarrassed. But you don't let them. You change the rules. You give them nothing to latch onto, and suddenly, their words start bouncing back at them. Let them keep speaking. Let them justify. Let them hurl accusations and wave fingers, while you remain composed, detached, and focused. Behind the scenes, you start doing real damage. You cut them off from what matters. You stop sharing access. You withhold information. You exclude them from the rooms that count. You take back your time, your energy, and your presence, without a word, without warning. No dramatic exit. No statement issued. Just quiet withdrawal. And what remains is someone spiraling, with no one left to engage. They'll grow frantic. They'll escalate their provocations. They'll raise their voice. But the louder they become, the more ridiculous they appear, because you're no longer on the field. Never interrupt your enemy when he is making a mistake. Machiavelli understood that the true power lies in letting your opponent speak, not to argue, but to let them reveal themselves. You don't need to explain or defend, you allow the audience to come to their own judgment. Because in the realm of perception, the one who appears least in control ultimately loses, even if, on paper, they seem to win. That's what this truly is, not a single blow, but a long game of perception, a battle for psychological advantage. You don't break them through aggression, you do it through contrast. You remain composed, they come undone. You speak with calm, they stumble over their words. You move forward, they stay fixated. And over time, it becomes obvious to everyone. This person isn't dangerous, they're a cautionary tale. Not because of what you declared, but because of what you never needed to say. Destruction without confrontation isn't a tactic, it's a mindset. It's a way of navigating conflict where your strength isn't shown, it's sensed. Because anyone can react in anger, but only the truly disciplined can cause collapse without ever laying a hand. This is the second tier of Machiavellian thinking. Turn their hunger for attention into their downfall. Your opponent isn't seeking reaction because they're powerful, but because they're empty inside. Insults, provocation, gossip, these aren't displays of strength. They're symptoms of lack. A lack of emotional fulfillment. A lack of social grounding. A desperate attempt to feel significant by draining that significance from you. So when they come for you, remember, it's never truly about you. It's about their need to feed off your energy, your name, your reputation, your visibility. Here's how you dismantle them without ever engaging. Let them run after your shadow until they exhaust themselves. You remain silent. You remain still. And you continue forward, visibly, privately, and with quiet authority. You keep building. You keep producing. You keep your focus on what matters, not on their noise. And what's the result? With every attempt they make, they shrink. They begin to appear obsessed, unstable, and insecure. You've rewritten the dynamic. It's no longer a conflict between two sides. Now it's just them chasing someone who's no longer even in the game, and nothing feels more powerless than that. That was Machiavelli's genius. He knew that attention is a form of power, and the moment you realize someone wants it more than you, you're the one in control. You create a void around their presence. You stop referencing them. You never criticize them, not out of virtue, but out of strategy. And each time they bring you up, while you remain silent, their words begin to echo in an empty room. People start to pick up on the imbalance. They ask, why are they so fixated on someone who isn't even responding? Why does someone who says nothing live so loudly in their mind? And slowly, they begin to wonder, maybe the problem isn't you at all. Doubt begins to creep in. And through a Machiavellian lens, doubt is the beginning of deterioration. Because once someone's image starts to crack, everything they say starts to carry less weight. That's the moment you move, not with hostility, but with sharp contrast. You arrive composed. You're well put together, calm in your delivery, focused on providing substance. Unaffected, steady, unshaken. While they stumble, lash out, and cling to whatever attention they can find by dragging your name through the mud. And yet, without any effort on your part, the distance between you grows. They tried to harm your standing, but instead, they revealed how much presence you carry, and how little they have without you. That's the true method of silent destruction. You don't fight them. You embody the evidence that they no longer matter. But it doesn't end there. There's another level, one more subtle, more insidious. Because not every attack is public. Some will work quietly in the shadows. They'll smile at you even as they plant seeds of suspicion behind your back. They'll twist your wins into signs of selfishness, your efforts into manipulation, your integrity into threat. These kinds of enemies aren't aiming for open battle, they're aiming for slow erosion. Gradual, invisible sabotage. And this is where many falter. They go on a mission to defend themselves. They try to fix the story, prove their innocence, explain every detail. But the truth is, the more you explain, the more real the accusation begins to sound. Machiavelli would never fall into that trap. So here's what you do. You don't disappear, you step into the light even more. You strengthen your name through what you deliver. You lead with excellence, right in front of the same people they try to influence behind your back. You speak with clarity in every meeting. You make confident, intelligent choices in public. You demonstrate consistency, integrity, and control, all without ever saying their name. Because you're allowing others to compare the narrative being spread with the reality you embody. And when the story doesn't match who's standing in front of them, the storyteller loses credibility. That's when the collapse begins. And you didn't need to confront them, they destroy themselves. They assumed your silence was submission. But your silence was the setup. You gave them the rope, and now they've hung themselves with it. This is the highest form of psychological destruction. You don't need them to fail, you only need them to lose access to you. You step out of their orbit. You continue on your path, without hesitation, without them. And their obsession is left to decay in isolation. They tried to pull you down. But instead, they locked themselves inside their own bitterness, while you kept rising. And everyone sees it. Because real power doesn't raise its voice, it simply stands firm. When destruction is done right, it doesn't come with a bang. It arrives quietly. It looks like silence around a name that used to matter. It feels like absence. The slow fading of attention. A subtle shift in power. One no one can quite explain, but everyone can feel. That's why Machiavelli didn't urge men to go to war as a first move. He taught them to become so essential, so present, and so undeniably effective that any attempt to bring them down would only lead to the attacker's own downfall. The best fortress which a prince can possess is the affection of his people. This is your third weapon, revealing the truth through contrast. You don't go after someone's character, you simply live in a way that exposes the lie. If they claim you're arrogant, respond with calm, generosity, and thoughtfulness. If they label you incompetent, produce sharp, accurate results. If they accuse you of being manipulative, stay transparent, consistent, and in control where everyone can see it. You're not rushing to defend yourself, you're allowing your presence to speak louder than their words. Because the more noise they make, and the more clearly you contradict it with your actions, the more isolated they become. People begin to notice the disconnect. They begin to question the story they've been told. And eventually, they stop paying attention to the accuser, not because you pushed back, but because you never even gave them the dignity of a response. That's where the real damage happens, not through public takedown, but through quiet erasure. Not humiliation, but irrelevance. Now let's go deeper. Because not all enemies are loud or obvious. Some operate with subtlety and calculation. They won't attack you openly. Instead, they'll position themselves beside you as if they belong in your lane. They'll echo your style, adopt your tone, map your relationships. They won't come at you with insults, they'll try to occupy your space. And this is where most people start to unravel. They feel threatened. Their identity feels hijacked. Their message begins to feel diluted. But Machiavelli understood the truth. When someone imitates you, they're not challenging your power, they're confirming it. They've admitted, without saying it, that your design is stronger than anything they could build on their own. So instead of reacting, you pivot. You grow. You shift the landscape so quickly that by the time they've adapted to who you were, you've already become someone new. You make yourself impossible to pin down, impossible to predict. They're chasing your shadow, while you're busy playing a game they'll never even comprehend. And then it hits them, slowly, painfully. They don't have the momentum. All they've got is your echo. This is how you outpace someone who's trying to become you. You raise the bar. You broaden your reach. You sharpen your message. You never linger in one version of yourself long enough for them to catch up. And you never speak their name, because doing so implies they're worth comparing. But by ignoring them completely, you make the truth unmistakable. There was never a competition to begin with. Now let's talk about the last kind of enemy, the one who thinks they're above you, the one who misjudges you, the one who dismisses you, the one convinced they're untouchable. These are the easiest ones to bring down, not by confronting them, but by repositioning yourself. You wait. You watch. You listen to the way they speak when they assume you're not worth listening to. And then you rise, not to prove anything, not to settle a score, but because nothing unsettles the arrogant more than being quietly outdone by someone they once dismissed. You don't fight for their seat, you build something stronger next to it. And when people start turning toward you, when the energy in the room shifts, when their words stop landing the way they used to, that's when it all starts to fall apart. Because ego is delicate, and people who depend on applause don't know how to function without it. The moment the clapping fades, they start to unravel from the inside out. And you? You never raised your voice. You never spoke ill of them. You never tried to take what was theirs. You simply became someone they couldn't deny and could never reach. That's how you win. Quietly, without conflict, without revenge. You become the living proof that they were never as strong as they wanted others to believe. Sometimes the most powerful move isn't to fight back. It's to keep moving. Keep succeeding. Keep evolving. Keep building quietly, while their obsession with bringing you down becomes the only thing holding them up. Because what Machiavelli understood, and what most people fail to realize, is this. The most thorough form of destruction isn't physical, reputational, or even social. It's existential. You don't just outplay someone, you render their efforts irrelevant. Their attacks turn into noise. You operate on such a different level that even if they manage to hit you, no one's looking, because everyone's already focused somewhere else. So how do you get to that place? You stop chasing victories in small battles. You start shaping the entire narrative. A battle is emotional, reactive, and temporary. But a frame, that's psychological, social, and built to last. So, what is a frame? It's the unspoken perception people carry about who you are, whether you say a word or not. And you shape that perception through your tone, your presence, your consistency, and your refusal to shrink under pressure. If someone attacks and you react, they're in control of the frame. If someone mocks you and you rush to defend yourself, they still own the narrative. If someone tries to undermine you and you scramble to fix it, you've already stepped into their world. But if you stay composed, if you move forward like nothing touched you, if your posture remains steady while there's turns loud and erratic, you've just flipped the entire equation. Now, you're no longer the person defending against an insult. You're the one so steady, so unaffected, that just the mention of your name makes them look unhinged. And once that happens, their credibility doesn't just slip, it unravels, slowly, in full view of everyone, and worst of all, by their own doing. You didn't need to discredit them, they did it themselves trying to get a reaction from you. Now let's go a level deeper. Because real Machiavellian destruction isn't about taking someone's power. It's about making sure they never get it back. And that means striking where they don't even realize they're exposed, their sense of identity. Here's the final move. You make it feel like they were never a real threat to begin with. You shift how you see them. You stop treating them like an enemy. If you reference them at all, it's as a side note, nothing more. You let go of the emotion. You release the history. You even take back your recognition of them. And when their name comes up, your response is something like, I haven't thought about them in a while. Hope they're doing well. Not sure what they're up to. You don't say it with sarcasm. You say it with genuine indifference. Because few things are more humiliating than realizing you didn't even make it into someone's story. Their attacks didn't leave a mark. Their words didn't land. Their presence didn't shape anything. They weren't a rival, they were just a reminder. And when others hear you speak like that, not with anger, but with calm detachment, they don't just respect your composure. They start to feel sorry for the person who tried to tear you down. This is what true collapse looks like. Not losing power, but losing significance. And once that's gone, there's no recovering it. Because the same people who once followed the drama are now watching you rise. And watching your opponent quietly fade, all without a single blow. You didn't attack. You didn't lower yourself. You didn't seek revenge. You simply let them realize that their attempt to bring you down wasn't just a failure. It was the very thing that undid them. This is the final act, a quiet crescendo. You held back when it would have been easy to lash out. You gave them nothing to feed off, no anger, no chaos. You stood your ground, calm and untouchable. And now there's only one move left. Step out of the spotlight, not in surrender, but in a kind of victory so absolute. Your enemy starts questioning if the war ever really happened at all. Because real destruction doesn't happen in public spectacle. It happens when you quietly remove someone's relevance, until your silence becomes the reason they fade. And silence, in the hands of someone truly powerful, isn't absence. It's control. Machiavelli understood. The most feared men weren't the ones who fought every battle. They were the ones you crossed once and never got another chance with. Their revenge wasn't loud, it was distance. They didn't slam doors, they simply stopped leaving them open. That's your final move. You don't need to announce anything, you become the announcement. You step into better circles. You align with people who don't even know your opponent's name. You operate on a level they can't reach, can't read, and can't follow. You stop playing their game and turn yourself into a completely different arena. And that's what finally breaks them. They thought it was a contest of status, but you made it about something lasting, legacy. They thought it was about image, you turned it into real influence. They believed the loudest voice would win. You proved that true power is most visible in your absence. Now, the same people who once watched your every move, they're still watching but with a different lens. They don't comment. They study. They try to decode the quiet logic behind how you move. Because deep down they know. You didn't just survive the hit. You used it to evolve into something untouchable. You let it refine you. You let it uncover who and what never truly deserved a place in your space. Because sometimes, enemies don't show up to stop your rise. They show up to reveal who you really are. Who you are when no one's applauding. When your reputation is under scrutiny. When your name is tossed around in rooms you've never even entered. When you're talked about with jealousy, fear, or insecurity, and you stay quiet. You don't spiral. You don't justify. You don't flinch. You speak louder with what you build. You lead by choosing what not to respond to. You win by never lowering yourself to their level. And in the end, they're left with nothing. The crowd they once tried to impress now pays quiet attention to you. The influence they thought they held has shifted, and now revolves around your words, your presence. The narrative they worked so hard to build? It's been quietly replaced by your silence, a silence that carries more weight than any defense ever could. That's what true Machiavellian strategy looks like. Not chaos, not confrontation, but surgical precision, quiet distance, and complete evolution. You're no longer someone they can harm, because you've become someone far beyond their reach.